The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Harrison's rifle range as Sarah Martinez adjusted her grip on the M4A1 carbine. The weapon felt foreign in her hands, heavier than she expected, and she could sense the eyes of 50 male soldiers watching her every move. She had arrived at the base just 3 days ago, fresh from basic training, and already the whispers followed her everywhere she went. "Look at the new girl," she heard someone mutter behind her. "Bet she can't even hold that rifle steady." Sarah kept her expression neutral, but her jaw tightened slightly. At 22 years old, she had grown up hunting with her father in the mountains of Colorado. But military shooting was different. Everything here was about precision, discipline, and proving yourself worthy of the uniform you wore. As the only woman in her unit, she knew she would be judged more harshly than anyone else. Sergeant Major Williams, a thick-built man with 30 years of military service etched into the lines of his weathered face, approached the firing line. His boots crunched against the gravel as he surveyed the row of soldiers preparing for qualification day. This was the day that would determine who earned their marksman badges and who would face additional training. "Listen up," Williams barked, his voice carrying across the range. "Today's qualification separates the shooters from the wannabes. You'll fire 40 rounds at targets ranging from 50 to 300 meters. 36 hits minimum to qualify. 39 hits for sharpshooter. And if you're lucky enough to hit all 40, you earn expert marksman." Sarah's palms were slightly damp as she checked her equipment one final time. She had been assigned rifle number 47, an older model that had seen countless training exercises. The stock showed wear marks from hundreds of hands that had gripped it before hers, and the metal had that dull patina that came from years of use and maintenance. Private Johnson, a cocky 20-year-old from Texas, leaned over from the next firing position. "Hope you're ready for some real shooting, Martinez. This ain't like plinking cans in your backyard." "I'm ready," Sarah replied quietly, not taking her eyes off her weapon as she performed her safety checks. Johnson smirked. "We'll see about that. Word is, they're thinking about making you our unit's radio operator. Safer job, you know, away from the action." The comment stung, but Sarah had heard worse during her 3 weeks of basic training. She had enlisted to serve her country and prove that women belonged in combat roles, not to be shuffled off to desk jobs or support positions. Her father had taught her that actions spoke louder than words, and today would be her chance to let her rifle do the talking. As the soldiers took their positions on the firing line, Sarah noticed something odd about her weapon. The charging handle felt stiff when she tried to cycle it, and the bolt didn't seem to move as smoothly as it should. She raised her hand to signal the range safety officer. "Sir, I think there might be an issue with my rifle," she called out. Corporal Davis, the range safety officer, jogged over with an annoyed expression. He was known for his impatience and his belief that soldiers should adapt to their equipment, not the other way around. "What's the problem, Martinez?" "The action feels stuck, sir. The bolt isn't cycling properly." Davis grabbed the rifle from her hands roughly and gave the charging handle a hard pull. It moved, but with obvious resistance. He shrugged and handed it back to her. "Works fine for me." Sarah felt her cheeks flush as several soldiers nearby chuckled. She knew the rifle wasn't functioning properly, but challenging a non-commissioned officer in front of the entire unit wasn't an option for a private fresh out of basic training. "Roger, sir," she said, accepting the weapon back. "All right, people," Sergeant Major Williams announced through his megaphone. "Load and lock. First string of fire will be 10 rounds prone position at 50 meters. When you hear the command to fire, you'll have 2 minutes to engage your targets." Sarah dropped into the prone position, feeling the hard-packed earth beneath her elbows. She pressed her cheek against the rifle stock and peered through the iron sights. The target downrange looked deceptively large at 50 meters, but she knew that precision was everything in military marksmanship. "This should be interesting," she heard someone whisper behind her. The command echoed across the range. "Commence firing." Sarah squeezed the trigger, and nothing happened. She tried again, applying steady pressure just as she had been taught. Still nothing. The rifle was completely jammed. Around her, the sharp cracks of M4 rifles filled the air as other soldiers engaged their targets. But her weapon remained silent. Panic began to creep into her chest. She tried cycling the charging handle again, but it barely moved. The rifle was effectively useless, and she was losing precious time while everyone else racked up their qualifying scores. "Cease fire! Cease fire!" came the command. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah hadn't fired a single shot. "Martinez," Sergeant Major Williams' voice boomed across the range. "What's your malfunction?" She stood up quickly. Rifle pointed downrange in the safe direction she had been taught. "Rifle malfunction. Sergeant Major. The weapon won't fire." Williams stormed over, his face already red with irritation. He snatched the rifle away and examined it briefly, then handed it back with a dismissive gesture. "Looks fine to me, Private. Maybe you need to review your basic weapons handling." The humiliation burned in Sarah's stomach as snickers rippled through the ranks behind her. She knew the rifle was malfunctioning, but in the military hierarchy, a private's word carried little weight against the judgment of senior non-commissioned officers. "Sir, I've checked everything," she began, but Williams cut her off. "I don't want to hear excuses, Martinez. You've got 4 more strings of fire to figure it out, or you'll be back here next week for remedial training." As the other soldiers prepared for the next firing position, Sarah examined her rifle more closely. She had grown up around firearms and knew the sound and feel of a properly functioning weapon. This rifle had problems that went beyond user error. But she was trapped in a situation where questioning authority would only make things worse. Private Johnson moved closer, a smug expression on his face. "Having trouble there, Martinez? Maybe you should stick to cooking or cleaning. Leave the shooting to the real soldiers." Sarah's father had always told her that the mark of a true professional was how they performed under pressure, especially when the odds were stacked against them. She thought about all the hours she had spent on the family ranch, learning to compensate for wind, elevation, and equipment quirks. If the military wanted to test her with a malfunctioning weapon, then she would find a way to make it work. "We'll see," she replied calmly, though her mind was already racing through possible solutions. The second string of fire was from the kneeling position at 100 meters. Sarah had noticed that the rifle's bolt seemed to respond better when she applied pressure to the forward assist after cycling the charging handle. It wasn't proper procedure, but desperate times called for creative solutions. "Load and lock for second string," Williams commanded. Sarah inserted her magazine and pulled the charging handle back as hard as she could, then slammed the forward assist with the heel of her palm. The bolt seated properly this time, and she felt a small surge of hope. "Commence firing." The rifle fired, but the empty case didn't eject properly. Sarah had to manually cycle the action between each shot, a process that ate up precious seconds. While other soldiers fired their 10 rounds in smooth, rapid succession, she managed only 6 shots before time expired. "Better," Williams commented grudgingly as he passed her position. "But you're already behind the curve." Sarah nodded. But internally she was calculating. She had identified the rifle's problems and was developing workarounds. The weapon had a faulty ejector that caused cases to stick, and the gas system wasn't cycling the bolt properly. With the right technique, she might be able to compensate for these mechanical failures. During the break between firing strings, she practiced her manual cycling technique, learning exactly how much force was needed to make the rifle function. Other soldiers rested or chatted, but Sarah treated every moment as valuable training time. "You know," Corporal Davis said as he walked past, "there's no shame in admitting you're not cut out for this, Martinez. Lots of good jobs in the military that don't require weapons expertise." Sarah looked up at him steadily. "I'm not quitting, sir," Davis shrugged. "Your choice, but you're already 15 rounds behind everyone else." As the third string of fire approached, Sarah felt something shift in her mindset. The doubt and frustration were being replaced by a cold, focused determination. She had been given a broken weapon and told to succeed anyway. Fine. She would show them exactly what she was capable of when pushed to her limits. The afternoon sun was getting hotter, and sweat beaded on her forehead as she prepared for the 200-meter standing position. This was traditionally the most challenging part of military qualification, requiring precise breath control and steady hands. With a malfunctioning rifle, it would be nearly impossible. Third string, standing position, 200 meters. Williams announced. 10 rounds, 3 minutes. Sarah took her stance, feet shoulder-width apart, rifle raised to her shoulder. Through her sights, the target looked small and distant. She controlled her breathing, finding that moment of natural respiratory pause that her father had taught her years ago. Commence firing. The first shot required 3 attempts before the rifle would fire, but when it did, she saw the target indicator flip to show a hit. Not just any hit, but a shot that appeared to be very close to the center ring. Sarah allowed herself a small smile as she manually cycled the bolt and prepared for her second shot. Something was happening that she hadn't expected. The forced manual operation of the rifle was actually helping her timing and rhythm. Instead of rapid fire, she was taking deliberate, carefully aimed shots. Each malfunction forced her to reset her position and breathing, creating a meditative precision that was producing excellent results. By the end of the third string, she had managed 8 hits out of 10 shots, with most of them landing very close to the center of the target. Several soldiers who had been watching her struggle were now paying closer attention, and the smirks were beginning to fade from their faces. "Not bad, Martinez," Williams admitted grudgingly. "But you're still behind on total rounds fired." Sarah nodded, but she was beginning to believe she could overcome this challenge. The rifle was teaching her things about precision and patience that a properly functioning weapon never could. Every shot required complete focus and technical perfection, and her mountain hunting experience was proving invaluable in reading wind and compensating for the weapon's quirks. As they prepared for the final 2 strings of fire, she overheard Private Johnson talking to one of his friends. "I don't know how she's doing it," he said, sounding less confident than before. "That rifle is clearly messed up, but she's still hitting the targets." Sarah smiled to herself as she checked her equipment one more time. The hardest part was yet to come, but she was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The 4th string of fire would test every skill Sarah had learned in her young military career. The 300-meter prone position was where good shooters separated themselves from average ones, and she would have to do it with a rifle that fought her on every shot. As she settled into position, Sarah noticed that word had spread about her performance. Soldiers from other units had drifted over to watch the woman who was somehow scoring hits with a malfunctioning weapon. The attention made her nervous, but it also fueled her determination. She had come too far to fail now. "This is where it gets real, Martinez," Sergeant Major Williams said as he stopped beside her firing position. 300 meters separates the pretenders from the marksmen. Think you can handle it with your equipment issues?" Sarah looked up at him, and for the first time since arriving at Fort Harrison, she saw something other than skepticism in his eyes. There was genuine curiosity there, and maybe even a hint of respect. "Yes, Sergeant Major," she replied confidently. "We'll see," he said. But his tone had lost its earlier dismissiveness. At 300 meters, the target appeared as a small silhouette in her iron sights. The morning breeze had picked up, and she could see the grass between her position and the target swaying gently from left to right. Wind calls at this distance could make the difference between a hit and a miss, and with only 10 shots available, every round counted. Sarah had been keeping a mental tally of her score. She had managed 14 hits out of the 30 rounds fired so far, putting her well below the qualifying standard of 36 total hits. She needed to shoot almost perfectly on these final 2 strings to have any chance of passing, let alone earning a marksman badge. 4th string, prone position, 300 meters. Williams announced through his megaphone. 10 rounds. 5 minutes. This is where we see who belongs here. Sarah pressed her cheek firmly against the rifle stock and found her sight picture. The target was small at this distance, but her father had taught her to shoot elk at ranges twice as far. She controlled her breathing, letting half the air out of her lungs and finding that natural pause where her body was most stable. Commence firing. Her first shot required the usual struggle with the charging handle and forward assist, but when the rifle finally fired, she knew immediately that it was a good hit. The target's indicator flipped black, showing a center hit that would score maximum points. The second shot was easier because she was learning the rifle's timing. Pull the charging handle firmly, push the forward assist with authority, settle into position, control breathing, squeeze the trigger smoothly. The process was becoming automatic, despite the weapon's mechanical problems. Shot after shot, Sarah fell into a rhythm that surprised even herself. The forced pause between rounds was giving her time to read the wind perfectly and adjust her point of aim. While other soldiers fired in rapid succession and sometimes rushed their shots, her methodical pace was producing remarkable accuracy. "Private Martinez," Corporal Davis called out after her 8th shot, "you need to pick up the pace. You're shooting too slow." But Sarah ignored him, staying focused on her process. She had learned that rushing with this particular rifle only led to more malfunctions and missed shots. Better to take her time and make each shot count. When the ceasefire command came, Sarah had fired all 10 rounds with time to spare. More importantly, she was confident that every shot had found its mark. The target looked like a veteran marksman had been working on it. With tight groupings clustered around the center rings. "Outstanding shooting, Martinez," said Lieutenant Parker, the range officer who had been observing her performance. "I've been watching you adapt to that rifle's problems, and your technique is impressive." Sarah felt a warm glow of pride, but tried to keep her expression professional. "Thank you, sir." As the targets were retrieved and scored, a small crowd had gathered around Sarah's lane. The other soldiers were looking at her scorecard with expressions of amazement and newfound respect. Her 10 shots at 300 meters had produced 9 hits, with 8 of them scoring maximum points. "How is that even possible?" Private Johnson asked, his earlier cockiness completely gone. "That rifle obviously has serious problems. Sometimes problems force you to be better," Sarah replied simply. "My father always said that smooth seas don't make skilled sailors." Sergeant Major Williams studied her scorecard with interest. 23 hits out of 40 rounds fired. You need 13 more hits on the final string to qualify, and 16 to earn sharpshooter. He looked at her directly. "Think you can do it?" Sarah calculated quickly in her head. The final string was back to 50 meters, the shortest distance of the qualification course. With a properly functioning rifle, it should be easy shooting, but her rifle's problems would be just as challenging at close range as they had been at distance. "I'll do my best, Sergeant Major. That's all any of us can do," he replied, and Sarah thought she detected a note of approval in his voice. During the break before the final string, Sarah took the opportunity to thoroughly examine her rifle one more time. She had learned its quirks and timing, but she wanted to be completely prepared for the final 10 shots that would determine her fate. The ejection problem seemed to be caused by a worn extractor spring, and the cycling issues were likely due to carbon buildup in the gas system. Under normal circumstances, the weapon would be sent to the armorer for repair, but these weren't normal circumstances, and Sarah had learned to work with what she had been given. "Martinez," a voice called behind her. She turned to see Captain Foster, the company commander, approaching her position. This was the first time the commanding officer had spoken to her directly since her arrival at Fort Harrison. "Yes, sir," she responded, coming to attention. "At ease," Captain Foster said. "I've been watching your performance today, and I have to say it's been impressive. Adapting to equipment failures under pressure is exactly the kind of problem-solving we need in combat situations." Sarah felt her chest swell with pride. "Thank you, sir." "That said," Foster continued, "I want you to know that if you don't qualify today, it won't be held against you. That rifle clearly has mechanical issues that would challenge even our most experienced marksmen." "I understand, sir, but I intend to qualify." Foster smiled. "I hoped you'd say that." "Carry on, soldier." As the final string approached, Sarah noticed that the entire range had grown quiet. Word had spread about the new female soldier who was shooting expert-level scores with a broken rifle, and everyone wanted to see how the story would end. The pressure should have been overwhelming, but Sarah found herself surprisingly calm. She had proven to herself that she could overcome the challenges thrown at her. Now it was just a matter of executing what she had learned over the past hour of shooting. "Final string," Sergeant Major Williams announced, his voice carrying clearly across the now silent range. 50 meters, standing position, 10 rounds, 2 minutes. This determines who goes home qualified and who comes back for remedial training. Sarah took her position on the firing line and raised her rifle. The target at 50 meters looked large and inviting after the challenge of 300-meter shooting. But she knew that overconfidence was the enemy of precision, and these final shots were the most important of the day. She had developed a routine for dealing with her rifle's problems, and she stuck to it religiously. Check the chamber, insert the magazine, pull the charging handle firmly, engage the forward assist, settle into position, control breathing, squeeze the trigger smoothly, load and lock, Williams commanded. Sarah went through her preparation ritual, feeling the familiar resistance as the bolt grudgingly moved into battery. The rifle was ready to fire, but she knew it would fight her on every shot. Commence firing. The first shot broke cleanly, and through her sights, Sarah saw the target indicator flip to show a hit. She manually cycled the action, cleared the stuck case, and prepared for shot number 2. Around her, other soldiers were firing in rapid succession, but she maintained her deliberate pace. Shot 2, another hit. Shot 3, hit. Shot 4, hit. Sarah was finding a zone that she had only experienced a few times in her life, usually while hunting with her father in the high country. Time seemed to slow down, and every movement felt precise and purposeful. The rifle's malfunctions became just another variable to manage, like wind or lighting conditions. Shot 5, hit. Shot 6, hit. Shot 7, hit. 30 seconds remaining, Williams called out. Sarah had 3 shots left and plenty of time. She was feeling confident, but she forced herself to maintain the same careful routine that had brought her this far. No rushing, no shortcuts, no assumptions. Shot 8, hit. Shot 9, hit. 1 shot remaining. Sarah took a deep breath and went through her ritual one final time. Pull the charging handle, engage the forward assist, settle into position, control breathing, squeeze the trigger. The final shot felt perfect as it left the rifle. Sarah watched through her sights as the target indicator flipped black, showing a center hit that would score maximum points. Cease fire, Williams commanded. Sarah lowered her rifle and engaged the safety, then stood waiting for the results. Her heart was pounding, but she felt a deep sense of satisfaction regardless of the outcome. She had given everything she had and overcome challenges that would have stopped many soldiers. The range fell silent as the targets were retrieved and scored. Sarah could feel dozens of eyes on her as Sergeant Major Williams examined her scorecard. His expression was unreadable as he made notes and double-checked the mathematics. Finally, he looked up with what might have been a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Martinez," he called out in a voice that carried across the entire range. "Yes, Sergeant Major," she replied. "Final string, 10 shots fired, 10 hits scored. Total qualification score, 33 hits out of 40 rounds." Sarah felt her stomach drop. 33 hits was good shooting, especially under the circumstances. But it was 3 shots short of the minimum qualifying score of 36. Williams continued. However, upon review of the equipment malfunction reports and considering the mechanical failures of rifle number 47, he paused, dramatically, and Sarah realized he was enjoying this moment. "The Range Safety Board has determined that your performance demonstrates exceptional marksmanship skills under adverse conditions. You are hereby awarded a qualifying score and," another pause, "due to your final string, perfect score, and overall accuracy percentage, you have earned the Sharpshooter Qualification Badge." The range exploded in cheers and applause. Sarah felt her knees go weak with relief and joy as soldiers who had been skeptical of her just hours before now surrounded her with congratulations and respect. The applause from her fellow soldiers felt surreal to Sarah as she stood on the firing line, still holding the malfunctioning rifle that had nearly ended her military career before it began. Private Johnson, who had been her harshest critic just hours earlier, was the first to approach her with an extended hand. "That was incredible shooting, Martinez," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "I've never seen anyone adapt to equipment problems like that. I owe you an apology for what I said earlier." Sarah shook his hand firmly. "No apology needed. We all have to prove ourselves here." Sergeant Major Williams approached with the rifle's service record in his hand, having retrieved it from the armory. His expression was a mixture of embarrassment and professional interest as he examined the maintenance logs. "Martinez, this weapon should have been pulled from service 2 weeks ago," he said, holding up the paperwork. According to this, it failed inspection twice and was scheduled for armory repair. Someone made a serious mistake assigning it to you today. Sarah felt a moment of vindication, but she kept her response measured. The rifle taught me some valuable lessons, Sergeant Major. Sometimes, the best training comes from overcoming unexpected challenges. Williams nodded slowly, studying her with new respect. That's a mature attitude, soldier. Most people would be demanding to know who screwed up and why. You're focused on what you learned instead of what went wrong. Captain Foster had been watching the exchange from nearby, and he stepped forward to join the conversation. Martinez, I want to discuss your performance today with you privately. Can you report to my office after you clean your equipment? Yes, sir, Sarah replied, wondering if she was in trouble despite her success on the range. As the other soldiers began cleaning their rifles and preparing to return to the barracks, Sarah took extra time with her weapon. The malfunctioning rifle had been her partner for the morning, and she wanted to give it the attention it deserved. She disassembled it completely, examining each component and noting the specific problems that had caused the cycling issues. Corporal Davis approached her cleaning station, looking uncomfortable. Martinez, I need to apologize for my attitude earlier. When you reported the rifle problems, I should have listened instead of dismissing your concerns. That was unprofessional of me. Thank you for saying that, Corporal, Sarah replied. We all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them. Davis nodded. You showed real character today. Not just marksmanship skills. That's going to serve you well in this unit. After cleaning and returning her equipment, Sarah made her way to Captain Foster's office. The company headquarters building was older than most structures on the base, with thick stone walls that kept it cool even in the afternoon heat. She knocked on the captain's door and heard his voice call for her to enter. Sir, Private Martinez reporting as ordered, she said, coming to attention. At ease, Martinez. Please, have a seat, Foster said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. I want to talk to you about what happened today and where we go from here. Sarah sat down, trying to read the captain's expression. His office walls were covered with unit commendations and photographs from various deployments, evidence of a long and successful military career. First, I want you to know that your performance today was exceptional by any standard, Foster began. But more than that, you demonstrated exactly the kind of adaptability and problem-solving skills we need in combat situations. Wars aren't won by soldiers who fold under pressure when their equipment fails. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Foster leaned back in his chair. I've been in command of this unit for 3 years, and I've seen a lot of soldiers come through our qualification courses. What you did today was special. Martinez, you didn't just overcome a mechanical problem. You turned it into an advantage. Sarah felt a flush of pride but tried to remain professional. I had good training growing up, sir. My father taught me that equipment is just a tool. The real weapon is the soldier using it. Smart man, Foster said with a smile. Now, I have a proposition for you. Next month, our unit is sending a team to compete in the All-Army Marksmanship Competition at Fort Benning. It's a prestigious event that brings together the best shooters from across all branches of the military. Sarah's heart began to race. The All-Army competition was legendary among marksmen. A chance to compete against the elite shooters from every unit in the armed forces. I'd like you to consider joining our team, Foster continued. Your performance today suggests you have the potential to compete at that level, and I think the experience would be valuable for your development as a soldier. Sir, I'm honored that you would consider me, but I've only been in the Army for a few months. Are you sure I'm ready for that level of competition? Foster nodded. I understand your concerns, but talent like yours doesn't come along often. Besides, the team selection process includes extensive training and qualification shoots. If you can't meet the standards, you won't make the final roster. But I think you might surprise yourself. Sarah thought about the opportunity. Competing at the national level would be intimidating, but it would also be a chance to represent her unit and prove that she belonged among the Army's elite marksmen. I'd be honored to try out for the team. Sir. Excellent, Foster said. Training starts Monday morning at 0500. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez will be running the program. He's tough, but he knows marksmanship better than anyone I've ever worked with. As Sarah left the captain's office, her mind was spinning with excitement and nervousness. Just that morning, she had been struggling to prove she deserved to be in the military at all. Now she was being invited to compete against the best shooters in the entire army. She decided to call her father that evening to share the news. The phone in the barracks common room provided limited privacy, but she needed to hear his voice and tell him about the day's events. "Dad, it's Sarah," she said when he answered. "Hey, sweetheart, how's military life treating you?" "Actually, pretty well. I had rifle qualification today, and some interesting things happened." Sarah proceeded to tell him about the malfunctioning rifle, the challenges she faced, and her ultimate success. Her father was quiet for a moment after she finished the story. "You know, Sarah, what you did today reminds me of something that happened to me years ago when I was hunting elk up in the high country." "What happened?" "My rifle scope got knocked out of alignment during a fall, and I had to make a shot at a big bull using only iron sights at nearly 400 yards. It was the hardest shot I ever made. But it taught me more about shooting fundamentals than years of perfect conditions ever could." Sarah smiled, understanding the parallel. Sometimes, the best lessons come from the worst circumstances. Exactly. And it sounds like you learned something important about yourself today too. You've got what it takes to handle pressure and adapt when things don't go according to plan. That's going to serve you well in the military and in life. After hanging up with her father, Sarah walked back to her bunk and lay down to process the day's events. The other soldiers in her unit were treating her differently now. With respect, rather than skepticism, she had proven something important to them and to herself. Private Johnson approached her bunk area later that evening, looking somewhat embarrassed. "Martinez, I wanted to talk to you about something," he said quietly. "What's on your mind?" "I've been thinking about what happened today, and I realized something. When you were struggling with that rifle, part of me was hoping you would fail. Not because I have anything against you personally, but because," he paused, searching for the right words. "Because you weren't sure women belonged in combat roles?" Sarah suggested gently. "Yeah, exactly. And I'm not proud of that attitude. What you showed today was that being a good soldier has nothing to do with gender. It's about character, skill, and determination. You've got all three in spades." Sarah appreciated his honesty. "Thanks for telling me that, Johnson. It means a lot that you're willing to reconsider your assumptions. Can I ask you something? How did you stay so calm when everything was going wrong? I would have been furious about getting stuck with a broken rifle." Sarah thought about the question. "I guess I learned early that getting angry at circumstances you can't control is a waste of energy. Better to focus on what you can control and find solutions." "That's good advice," Johnson said. "Maybe you could give me some shooting tips sometime. I qualified today, but barely. I could use some help improving my technique." "I'd be happy to help," Sarah replied. "We're all on the same team here." As the evening wore on and the barracks grew quiet, Sarah reflected on how much had changed in just one day. She had arrived at the range that morning as an unknown quantity, a female soldier who might or might not belong in a combat unit. She was ending the day as a proven marksman who had been invited to compete at the highest levels of military marksmanship. But more than that, she had learned something important about herself. Under pressure, when everything seemed to be going wrong, she had found a way to adapt and succeed. The malfunctioning rifle had become a teacher, forcing her to develop skills and mental toughness that she might never have discovered under normal circumstances. Sergeant Major Williams stopped by her bunk before lights out. "Martinez, I wanted you to know that word about your performance today has already reached battalion headquarters. Colonel Peterson wants to meet with you tomorrow afternoon." Sarah sat up in her bunk, surprised. "The battalion commander wants to see me, Sergeant Major." "Don't worry, it's nothing bad. The colonel makes it a point to personally congratulate soldiers who demonstrate exceptional performance. Your shooting today was exceptional by any standard." "Thank you, Sergeant Major. I appreciate everything you and Captain Foster have done for me." Williams nodded. "You earned it, soldier. Get some rest. Tomorrow you start training for the real challenges." As Sarah settled into her bunk that night, she thought about the journey that lay ahead. The all-army marksmanship competition would test her against the best shooters in the military, men and women who had been honing their skills for years. It would be intimidating, but she was ready for the challenge. The malfunctioning rifle had taught her that excellence wasn't about having perfect conditions. It was about finding ways to succeed regardless of the obstacles in your path. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to grow and prove herself. But tonight, she allowed herself to feel proud of what she had accomplished with determination, skill, and a rifle that everyone said couldn't shoot. Monday morning arrived with the crisp coolness of dawn, and Sarah found herself standing on a different range at 0500 hours sharp, along with 12 other soldiers who had been selected for marksmanship team tryouts. The facility was more sophisticated than the basic qualification range, with electronic targets, wind flags at various distances, and equipment that spoke of serious precision shooting. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was exactly what Captain Foster had described, a compact, intense man whose every movement suggested complete mastery of his craft. His uniform was immaculate, and his eyes held the sharp focus of someone who had spent years perfecting the art of precision marksmanship. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rodriguez began, his voice carrying easily across the group, "welcome to the most challenging marksmanship training you will experience in your military careers. Over the next 3 weeks, we will determine who among you has what it takes to represent this installation at the all-army competition." Sarah glanced around at her fellow candidates. Most were senior enlisted soldiers with years of experience, and several wore expert marksman badges. She was clearly the least experienced member of the group, a fact that wasn't lost on the others. "The selection process is simple," Rodriguez continued. "We will shoot every day under various conditions. Wind, rain, different distances, different positions, and different time pressures. Those who consistently perform at the highest levels will earn spots on the final 6-person team." Sergeant First Class Thompson, a veteran marksman with multiple competition badges, raised his hand. "Staff Sergeant, what are the qualification standards for team selection?" "Good question, Thompson. To make the team, you'll need to average expert-level scores across all shooting disciplines, demonstrate consistency under pressure, and show the ability to adapt to changing conditions. We'll also evaluate your ability to work as part of a team and represent the unit professionally." Rodriguez's gaze settled on Sarah. "Martinez, I understand you had an interesting qualification experience last week. Tell me about it." Sarah felt all eyes turn to her as she described the malfunctioning rifle and how she had adapted to overcome the mechanical problems. Rodriguez listened without expression, occasionally nodding as she explained her thought process and solutions. "Interesting," he said when she finished. "Equipment failures are common in competition shooting. Weather conditions, ammunition variables, and mechanical issues are all part of the challenge. Your ability to adapt under pressure suggests you might have potential for this level of competition." The first week of training was unlike anything Sarah had experienced in her military career. Rodriguez pushed the candidates through shooting scenarios designed to test every aspect of their marksmanship skills. They shot in rain, wind, and blazing sunlight. They fired from awkward positions, under time pressure, and with various equipment configurations. Sarah struggled initially with the advanced techniques Rodriguez was teaching. Competition marksmanship was far more sophisticated than basic military shooting, requiring precise understanding of ballistics, wind reading, and equipment tuning. But her experience with the malfunctioning rifle had taught her to pay attention to details that other shooters might overlook. "Martinez," Rodriguez called out during her 3rd day of training, "your position fundamentals are solid, but you're not reading the wind consistently. Watch the flags between you and the target, not just the ones near your firing point." Sarah adjusted her technique, paying attention to wind indicators at multiple distances downrange. Her next string of shots grouped tighter than any she had fired since training began. "Better," Rodriguez said. "Remember, precision shooting is as much about gathering information as it is about pulling the trigger." By the end of the first week, 3 candidates had been eliminated from the program. The pace and pressure were intense, and not everyone could maintain the level of performance required. Sarah was holding her own, But she knew she was still learning while others were demonstrating skills honed over years of practice. The second week brought new challenges. Rodriguez introduced rapid-fire events, where shooters had to engage multiple targets in sequence, testing both accuracy and speed. This was where Sarah's experience with the malfunctioning rifle proved unexpectedly valuable. Martinez, Rodriguez observed after she completed a particularly challenging rapid-fire string. Your rhythm is different from the other shooters, but your results are consistently good. What's your thought process during these sequences? I learned to make every shot deliberate, Staff Sergeant, Sarah explained. When I was dealing with the rifle problems during qualification, I couldn't rely on speed. I had to make sure each shot was perfect before moving to the next one. Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. That's actually excellent technique for competition shooting. Many shooters rush their shots and sacrifice accuracy for speed. Your approach prioritizes precision, which is usually more effective in the long run. The comment boosted Sarah's confidence, and she began to see her earlier challenges as advantages rather than setbacks. While other shooters were learning to slow down and be more deliberate, she was already comfortable with that approach. Midway through the second week, Rodriguez announced that they would be conducting team shooting exercises, where pairs of shooters would have to coordinate their fire and communicate wind conditions to each other. Sarah was paired with Sergeant Thompson, the experienced marksman who had initially been skeptical of her inclusion in the program. Look, Martinez, Thompson said as they prepared for their first team exercise. I know you've been shooting well individually, but teamwork requires trust and communication. I need to know you can handle the pressure of someone depending on your observations. I understand, Sergeant, Sarah replied. What do you need from me? Thompson studied her for a moment. I'll shoot first and call out my wind readings. Then you'll shoot and either confirm my calls or make corrections based on what you observe. The key is honest communication, even if you think my readings are wrong. The exercise began with targets at 400 meters, both shooters engaging the same target zone but from slightly different firing positions. Thompson fired his first shot and called out his wind reading. 2 minutes left to right. Steady. Sarah observed the wind flags and grass movement between their position and the target, then fired her shot. Based on her observation, the wind was actually stronger than Thompson had estimated. I'm seeing closer to 3 minutes left to right, Sergeant, she said. The flags at 200 meters are showing more movement than the ones at our position. Thompson looked downrange more carefully, then nodded. You're right. I was reading the wind at our position instead of averaging the conditions downrange. Good catch. They continued the exercise, with both shooters making adjustments based on shared observations. Sarah's attention to detail and willingness to speak up when she disagreed with wind calls impressed Thompson, and their scores improved as they learned to work together. Martinez, Thompson said after they completed the exercise, I owe you an apology. When I heard they were putting a soldier with only basic qualification experience on this team, I thought it was a mistake. But you're reading conditions better than some marksmen I've worked with for years. Thank you, Sergeant. I'm still learning a lot from the more experienced shooters. We're all still learning, Thompson replied. That's what makes this challenging and interesting. As the third week of training began, Rodriguez announced that they would be conducting the final selection shoots. Only 6 shooters would make the team, and the competition among the remaining 9 candidates was intense. The selection process will consist of 3 stages, Rodriguez explained. Individual precision shooting at known distances, rapid-fire engagements under time pressure, and team coordination exercises. Each stage will be scored independently, and the top performers across all categories will make the final team. Sarah felt nervous but confident as she prepared for the individual precision stage. This was what she had been training for since the program began, and she had steadily improved her technique and consistency. The precision stage required each shooter to engage targets at distances ranging from 200 to 600 meters, using various positions and dealing with changing wind conditions throughout the day. It was a comprehensive test of marksmanship, fundamentals, and the ability to adapt to environmental variables. Sarah's performance was solid but not spectacular. She shot consistently well across all distances and positions. But several other candidates posted higher individual scores. She was beginning to worry that her relative inexperience might cost her a spot on the team. The rapid-fire stage was where Sarah's unique background began to pay dividends. Her experience with the malfunctioning rifle had taught her to maintain composure under pressure and execute perfect technique even when things weren't going according to plan. While other shooters sometimes let the time pressure affect their fundamentals, Sarah maintained her deliberate, precise approach. "Excellent work, Martinez," Rodriguez commented after she completed her rapid-fire string. "You're consistently achieving good hits under time pressure, without sacrificing accuracy for speed." The team coordination stage was the final test, and Sarah was again paired with Sergeant Thompson. By now, they had developed an effective communication system and mutual trust in each other's observations and abilities. "Martinez," Thompson said as they prepared for their final team exercise, "I want you to know that working with you has made me a better shooter. Your attention to detail and willingness to question assumptions has improved my wind-reading skills. I've learned just as much from you, Sergeant. Your experience and knowledge have been invaluable." Their team performance was excellent, with both shooters adapting quickly to changing conditions and providing accurate information to each other. They finished the exercise with some of the highest combined scores in the program. That evening, Rodriguez gathered all the candidates together for the team announcement. Sarah sat with the other shooters, trying to control her nervousness as Rodriguez reviewed his notes and prepared to announce the final roster. "Before I announce the team," Rodriguez began, "I want to say that every one of you has demonstrated exceptional marksmanship skills over the past 3 weeks. Those who don't make this particular team should be proud of their performance and continue developing their skills for future opportunities." He paused and looked around the group. The 6 shooters selected for the All-Army Marksmanship Competition team are Sergeant First Class Thompson, Staff Sergeant Chen, Sergeant Williams, Specialist Johnson, Specialist Rodriguez, and another pause that seemed to last forever, Private Martinez. Sarah felt a surge of joy and relief so strong that she had to fight back tears. She had made the team despite being the least experienced candidate, and she had earned the respect of some of the Army's best marksmen in the process. After the announcement, Rodriguez approached her personally. "Martinez, I want you to understand why you made this team. It wasn't just because of your shooting scores, although they were consistently good. It was because you demonstrated the mental toughness, adaptability, and attention to detail that make for successful competitive marksmen. Thank you, Staff Sergeant. I won't let the team down." "I know you won't," Rodriguez replied. "Your experience with that malfunctioning rifle taught you lessons that some shooters never learn. You understand that precision shooting is about problem-solving and adaptation, not just technical skill." As Sarah walked back to her barracks that night, she thought about how much her life had changed since that morning on the qualification range 3 weeks earlier. She had gone from being a doubtful newcomer to earning a spot on the Army's elite marksmanship team, but more importantly, she had discovered capabilities within herself that she never knew existed. 3 weeks later, Sarah found herself standing on the firing line at Fort Benning, Georgia, surrounded by the best marksmen from every major military installation in the United States. The All-Army Marksmanship Competition represented the pinnacle of military shooting sports, and the atmosphere was electric, with nervous energy and competitive intensity. The competition facility was impressive beyond anything Sarah had ever seen. Multiple ranges stretched across hundreds of acres, with electronic scoring systems, climate-controlled preparation areas, and spectator viewing areas that were already filling with officers and senior enlisted personnel who had come to watch their units compete. "Welcome to the big leagues, Martinez," Sergeant Thompson said, as they set up their equipment in the team preparation area. "This is where we find out if all our training was worth it." Sarah nodded, trying to control her nerves as she unpacked her rifle case. The weapon she would be using was a precision-built M4 variant, specially selected and tuned for competition shooting. It was a far cry from the malfunctioning rifle that had started her marksmanship journey just 2 months earlier. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez gathered the team for a final briefing before the competition began. "Listen up, people. We've trained hard for this moment, and you're all ready to perform at this level. Remember your fundamentals, trust your training, and support each other throughout the competition." The format was challenging: individual precision events, team competitions, and stress fire scenarios designed to test every aspect of marksmanship skill under pressure. Teams would be ranked based on their combined scores across all events, with individual recognition for outstanding performances in specific categories. Sarah's first event was individual precision shooting at known distances, the same discipline that had been her strongest area during team selection. As she settled into position on the firing line, she noticed that she was the youngest competitor in her relay and one of only 3 women competing in the entire event. The targets were set at 500 meters, and each shooter would fire 20 rounds for score. Wind conditions were tricky, with gusts varying in direction and intensity throughout the range. Sarah had learned during training that these were exactly the conditions where careful observation and patience paid dividends. Relay 1, you may commence firing, announced the range officer. Sarah went through her established routine. Check wind flags, settle into position, control breathing, squeeze the trigger smoothly. The first shot felt good as it left the rifle, and she saw the target indicator show a high-scoring hit near the center of the target. She had learned during her team training to shoot at her own pace rather than trying to match the rhythm of other competitors. While some shooters fired rapidly and then waited for their scores, Sarah maintained a steady, deliberate pace that allowed her to read changing wind conditions between shots. By the 10th round, Sarah was shooting what felt like some of the best groups of her competitive career. The rifle was performing flawlessly, and her wind reading skills were keeping her shots consistently in the high-scoring zones despite the challenging conditions. Outstanding shooting, soldier, commented Master Sergeant Davis, the range safety officer, as he observed her technique. Your wind calls are spot on for these conditions. Sarah smiled but maintained her focus on the remaining 10 shots. She had learned that precision shooting required sustained concentration, and losing focus for even one shot could significantly impact her overall score. When the ceasefire command was given, Sarah felt confident about her performance but knew that the level of competition here was higher than anything she had previously experienced. As the targets were retrieved and scored, she tried to estimate her own performance while watching the reactions of other competitors. Martinez, called Rodriguez from the scoring table. Report to the results posting area. Sarah approached nervously, unsure whether she was being summoned for good news or bad. Rodriguez was studying a scorecard with an expression she couldn't read. Your score for the individual precision event, he said, then paused dramatically, is 198 out of 200 possible points. That puts you in second place overall and first place among female competitors. Sarah felt her knees go weak with relief and excitement. Scoring 198 out of 200 at this level of competition was beyond her wildest expectations when she had started her marksmanship journey with a malfunctioning rifle. How did I lose 2 points? She asked, curious about where she could improve. Rodriguez showed her the target analysis. 2 shots were just outside the 10 ring, probably due to wind calls that were slightly off. But honestly, Martinez, this is exceptional shooting for someone with your level of experience. Word of Sarah's performance spread quickly through the competition venue. By the time she returned to the team preparation area, several competitors from other units had approached her to offer congratulations and ask about her training background. Incredible shooting, said Sergeant Major Williams from the Fort Carson team. I heard you only started competitive shooting a few months ago. What's your secret? Sarah thought about the question. I learned early that equipment problems and challenging conditions are just variables to manage, not excuses for poor performance. Every shot teaches you something if you pay attention. The team events began the following day, and Sarah found herself shooting alongside Sergeant Thompson in a pairs competition, where both shooters had to engage targets simultaneously while communicating wind conditions and target observations to each other. Their partnership had been refined through weeks of training, and they had developed an almost intuitive understanding of each other's shooting style and communication preferences. Thompson would call out wind conditions based on his observations, and Sarah would either confirm or suggest corrections based on what she was seeing from her position. Wind is shifting, Thompson called out during their third target engagement. I'm seeing 2 minutes right to left. At 300 meters, Sarah observed the wind flags and grass movement downrange. Confirmed, but it's stronger at the target. I'm calling 3 minutes right to left. Thompson adjusted his point of aim based on her correction and fired. The shot scored a perfect 10, validating Sarah's more aggressive wind call. "Good eye, Martinez," he said. "You're reading the downrange conditions better than I am today." Their team performance was exceptional, with both shooters maintaining high scores while adapting quickly to changing environmental conditions. When the scores were posted, they had achieved first place in their division and helped put their overall team in contention for the unit championship. The final day of competition featured stress fire events designed to test marksmanship skills under extreme time pressure and challenging scenarios. Shooters had to engage multiple targets at various distances within strict time limits, simulating combat conditions where speed and accuracy were equally important. This was where Sarah's unique background proved most valuable. Her experience with the malfunctioning rifle had taught her to maintain perfect technique even when everything seemed to be going wrong. While other competitors sometimes let the pressure affect their fundamentals, Sarah executed each shot with the same deliberate precision she had learned during her qualification ordeal. "Martinez," Rodriguez observed after she completed her stress fire sequence, "your performance under pressure is remarkable. You maintained the same level of precision in rapid fire that most shooters only achieve in slow fire conditions." "Thank you, Staff Sergeant. I learned that rushing usually makes things worse, not better." When the final scores were calculated and posted, Sarah's individual performance had earned her third place overall among all competitors, making her the highest-scoring female marksman in the competition. Her team had finished second overall, an outstanding result considering they were competing against units with decades of competition experience. The awards ceremony that evening was held in Fort Benning's main auditorium, with hundreds of spectators and competitors in attendance. As Sarah walked across the stage to receive her bronze medal for individual excellence, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. General Morrison, the commanding general of Fort Benning, presented her award personally. "Private Martinez," he said as he placed the medal around her neck, "your performance this week has been exceptional, but more than that, you've demonstrated the kind of adaptability and mental toughness that exemplifies the best qualities of our soldiers." "Thank you, General. It's been an honor to compete at this level." After the ceremony, Sarah was approached by Major Collins from the Army Marksmanship Unit, the military's premier shooting team that competed in international competitions, including the Olympics. "Martinez, I've been watching your performance throughout this competition, and I wanted to discuss some opportunities with you," Collins said. "Your scores and technique suggest you might have potential for international-level competition." Sarah felt her heart race at the possibility. "Sir, I'm honored that you would consider me, but I'm still very new to competitive shooting." "That's actually an advantage in many ways," Collins replied. "You haven't developed any bad habits that need to be corrected, and your mental approach to shooting is already very mature. Would you be interested in attending a selection camp later this year?" "Yes, sir. Absolutely." As the competition concluded and teams began preparing to return to their home stations, Sarah reflected on how completely her life had changed since that morning when she was handed a malfunctioning rifle and told to qualify anyway. Sergeant Thompson found her packing her equipment and sat down beside her. "Martinez, I wanted to thank you for everything you've taught me over the past few weeks." "What do you mean, Sergeant?" "When you first joined our training program, I thought experience was everything in marksmanship competition. But watching you perform this week taught me that attitude and mental approach are just as important as technical skills. You never let setbacks or challenges affect your confidence or performance." Sarah smiled. "I had a good teacher early on. That broken rifle taught me that excellence isn't about having perfect conditions. It's about finding ways to succeed regardless of the obstacles." "That's a lesson I'll remember for the rest of my career," Thompson said. On the flight back to Fort Harrison, Sarah gazed out the window and thought about the unexpected path that had led her from a struggling recruit to a nationally recognized marksman in just a few months. The malfunctioning rifle that could have ended her military career had instead become the foundation for achievements she never could have imagined. But more than the medals and recognition, she had discovered something important about herself. When faced with seemingly impossible challenges, she had the ability to adapt, learn, and find ways to excel. Those lessons would serve her well throughout her military career and beyond. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez sat down beside her as the plane began its descent. Martinez, I want you to know that your performance at this competition exceeded everyone's expectations, including mine. Thank you, Staff Sergeant. The training you provided made all the difference. No, Rodriguez said, shaking his head. The training gave you tools and techniques. But what you accomplished required something that can't be taught. You have natural talent, combined with an exceptional work ethic and mental toughness. That combination is rare. As Fort Harrison came into view below them, Sarah thought about the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. The invitation to try out for the Army Marksmanship Unit represented a chance to compete at the highest levels of international shooting sports, but it would also require years of dedicated training and sacrifice. She was ready for that challenge. The malfunctioning rifle had taught her that excellence was possible even under the worst circumstances, and she was determined to see just how far her skills and determination could take her. When they landed and returned to the base, Sarah found a message waiting for her to report to Colonel Peterson's office the following morning. She spent that evening cleaning her equipment and reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point, knowing that tomorrow would likely bring new opportunities and new challenges. The young woman who had struggled with a broken rifle just months earlier was now a nationally recognized marksman with potential for international competition. It had been a transformation that no one, including Sarah herself, could have predicted when Sergeant Major Williams handed her rifle number 47 and told her to qualify anyway. But as her father had always said, smooth seas don't make skilled sailors. The challenges that had seemed like obstacles at the time had actually been the foundation for everything that followed. Sarah was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, confident in her ability to adapt, learn, and excel, regardless of the circumstances she might face.